You're very welcome back. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how pressure reveals the truth. I believe that pressure, it doesn't create character, it actually reveals it. Similar to shooting, pressure doesn't suddenly help you become a better shot. We train to bring up our average and then we compete to basically stamp the average. Um, we don't suddenly become better at competitions. Our sport, anyway, is not one of those where, you know, dug deeper. Um, it's not about lifting. So adrenaline, it's not running, lifting. It's not a physical sport as such. It's quite a physical one that maybe is not as visible, but shouting, screaming, jumping around like you'll see in football matches and stuff like that, Clash of the Ash in hurling, that doesn't help you. It's actually more about being calm and being quiet and being peaceful and reducing the energy. But in shooting, you don't get better by having a rush of adrenaline or thumping your chest or anything like that. And pressure doesn't make us better shots. It actually can make you crumble if you don't have something underlying that's repeatable and is solid, such as a shot process. I would say we have this shooting term called 0 point, and that's when everything is perfectly aligned in balance and the rifle is pointing exactly at the bull. Um, it it's not something that can be forced. It's something internal that's balanced. And I suppose the way I'd look at it is, if you stop bullshitting yourself about what the pressure did, when I'm under pressure, I do far better. That, by the way, may be because your process allows you to become very centered and balanced and continue under pressure, but it didn't make you suddenly become something you're not. That would be my belief anyway. And I think people think pressure is negative. I think pressure is a mirror. That's more to the point. It's an indicator. It's actually that compass again flicking. If the compass is not pointing in the one direction, you'll find that it starts moving. That's the equivalent of pressure. And if you're feeling under pressure, you'd have to ask yourself, so what is it that's putting you under that pressure? Because more work doesn't particularly put you under pressure. Tile mines can put you under pressure because they weren't planned effectively, not the same thing as the work. And the process underlying should be able to hold so that it doesn't become over pressurized. So yeah, I'd say the pressure isn't a negative. I'd say it's a mirror and shouldn't be ignored, by the way, because it's an opportunity. I'd say as well, everyone wants responsibility until responsibility arrives. And that's where the pressure comes from, the dying minutes of the game. I've been in games back when I was able to walk. You'd look around in the last 5 minutes, you'd have the ball and you'd be looking to see who's looking for it. And you'd have nothing but backs to you, guys running frantically, anything except turning around looking for the ball, by the way. I've seen people in projects in work. Oh, they want to step up. I've even had one person liking themselves to Red Adair. The funny thing is, they only loved the thought of being the person who wanted to be Red Adair. When it came to being Red Adair, they weren't half as interested in what that meant. It was the identity rather than what it really meant is what they were after. I wouldn't say, you're not going to get from me on this one, by the way, that becoming stronger under pressure is important, things like that. I'd actually say it's going to be more about understanding what pressure is actually showing you. Maybe a little bit about why it gets a bad rep. I've heard people going, oh, that's a very high pressurized job, things like that. That person shouldn't be doing that. Couldn't be good for them. What pressure does and doesn't do. When I noticed it first, and yeah, when did it become clear? It's everywhere. You'll find it in sports, you'll find it in business, you'll find it in leadership, you'll find it in relationships of all things, of all types. You generally find it in life, everything. Um, I'd say it's when things don't go as planned. I think that's where pressure comes from. When we're following a plan, there's not as much pressure if you think about it. Pressure comes from where something is introduced into, for example, a work environment. Something comes from the left side or the right side. You're delivering a project, for example, and suddenly there's a timeline change. Let's give a perfectly simple one. So you're putting a IT infrastructure in on a greenfield site. Part of the plan is the comms room is ready on a certain date, because the next thing is you're going to have mainframes, or you're going to have mid-range system frame, whatever it is, PCs. They're all going to be delivered once the building is done, once the comms room is ready, all those things. Now someone drops the ball and a part of that project is not delivered. So, for example, um, your 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 supplier that's putting in the cabling in the comms room, the routers didn't arrive. Now you're stuck. Why? Because you can't complete that element of work. The pressure comes on because a part of the project plan has suddenly fallen. Now, how you do that is you mitigate so that that's not a case. In shooting, a wild shot comes in. You're in 30 shots in, and suddenly something ends up in the 8.9, even though you've been shooting 10.9s. Now, if you let that become an emotional thing, you're going to be under massive pressure. There's the, oh, how did that happen? And you run off into the, not the how do we fix it, but how did that happen? There you go. In work, when projects go a little bit awry, how did that happen is where people run to. Me, I run to, how do we fix this? Why? Because the outcome still needs to be the outcome. But the pressure comes from the insecurities, the lack of control, also the lack of internal alignment that you fall back on. I'd say that pressure reveals the true 0 point. In shooting, when the pressure comes on, if that rifle wants to point anywhere other than where it naturally wants to point, you're introducing energy into it. Similarly in work, it's similarly in projects, similarly in personal relationships. You'll find that the pressure that comes on shows that you weren't aligned in the first place. An example might be someone who was a friend, you thought was a friend for whatever reasons. Um, and suddenly in the middle of things, you're going, this is not really feeling right anymore. We used to play golf on a certain day or do something. Now it seems to be too much hassle. And it turns out it wasn't something they really wanted to do. It was something they felt that they had to do. It falls out. Nothing wrong with it, by the way. It just shows that it was never internally aligned. Um, I believe people become themselves under pressure. You've heard of people like, oh, the person loses the head in meetings and starts shouting and screaming and stuff like that, and it's blame and all. And oh, I'm sorry now, but it was very pressurized. Actually, no, that was their default point, and they may have been performing of very calm, very secure, when actually, no, the pressure came on, and that really showed up them as a character. That's what I would say. We return to self if you want under pressure. So I'd say build yourself. 5 things that I believe pressure makes visible, and I'd say that's character. It's not what you do in the calm that matters. It's what you do when no one's watching. When there's no one to perform for, it's purely you. That's the time that pressure will show up. Um, Preparation. It doesn't create preparation. It tests what's been prepared. How well you're prepared is reflected in how well you perform when pressure comes on. Consistency. You'll find over time people in roles, they are consistent in how they actually act. When pressure comes on, you'll find that there's a crack there. So the very calm, cool, collected person who's perfect until things go wrong, and then they suddenly fly off. I don't mean that once in a blue moon type thing of, oh, that's a bit out of character. But when you see that character trait under pressure, pressure is what pretty much shines a light on that. Trustworthiness, it makes pressure visible. You know, they're clear and calm, and their word means everything to them until. And until is like the honesty factor when a team screws up in a project. Pressure comes on. Suddenly, someone's naming someone as being responsible for things rather than trying to fix the problem. They've already got the small book of who's to blame. That's a default position too, by the way. We've heard the blame game. Don't love the term, but it is what it is. Another thing too is loads of people want responsibility until the consequences are outlined. Yeah. Everyone wants to be the boss until they hold the boss stick and they're dealt with the same way as a boss. You know, you've seen this. So the CEO has it handy. They're paid all this money, sort of thing. I'll tell you, the further you go up the food chain, the quicker you disappear, and the less people will care. At the bottom of the food chain in businesses, you'll find there's unions, there's team that back each other up, and we unite against the management, whatever sort of thing. If you go in at sea level, you'll be gone with the dawn if things go wrong, and there'll be no one fighting for you to stay there either. Um, Everyone wants the responsibility, but actually, I think they want the identity that the responsibility is perceived as having without any of the consequences. And shooting, the beauty of shooting for me is that target is just an indicator. That's all it is. It the shot that lands there is an indication of just how well my process was executed. But it's also history, and it's history of the project, if you want, history of the process. It tells me historically how each step was executed, and that landing that bullet, that pellet, that tells me just how well it was done. So it's history, can't be undone. Um, I'd say pressure is showing you who you are, and either you accept that you're under pressure and do something about it, or you just stay under pressure. Personally, I look at ways of releasing the pressure, and I don't mean long walks. Well, it's not going to happen anymore anyway. What I mean is, for example, alignment around people. I align with certain people. I don't spend a lot of time with people I don't align with. I don't feel like I'm having to suck it up over a coffee purely to maintain friendships. I would work with companies who are aligned with the way I view the world. I don't have extremist views, by the way, but I do have views on how, if you want to do things. For example, I've previously I would have gone for public sector roles um, as project manager, and I would have walked away from them primarily because their goal was not to deliver anything. I preferred working for companies because they were investing money for an outcome, and there was a win-lose situation in that. There was no one going to be successful purely because we tried. That's a factor I do enjoy. Um, when you find out that you're not aligned, you have to figure out what you want to do with it. When you're feeling that that pressure is not fitting inside you, or you have pressure, you have to decide either to do something or don't do something. Um, but it but it's choices. There's I would say that it's not a weakness when you find the pressure that you're under pressure. You know, actually, I would say um, it's never a sign of weakness that you're under pressure. I'd say you have a problem though pretending that the weakness isn't there, if that's what it is. Um, it's when you get into explaining why things are the way they are rather than doing something about them. It's when you're blaming outcomes on external causes. So, I mean, there's everything when I go to competitions or when I'm competing. Oh, it was down to, you know, it was where I was on the line. It was the light was this, the light was that. Oh, I hadn't eaten properly. Oh, I hadn't drank enough. This type of stuff. Similarly, in projects, I'd never end up in a situation where, of any time when I was under pressure, I'd never end up in a situation where there was excuses. in that situation, I hadn't if that came about, I wouldn't have identified the project challenges, for example, so I could mitigate against them. Um, it's all about how you tell yourself that story. You know, again, I'm back to the 2 o'clock in the morning thing. When you're looking in that mirror, you're the only one who's looking and you're the only one who's listening. And you can tell everyone outside of that why things are the way they are, but you know yourself and you know that there are choices and you know that you can make them or you don't make them, and that's fine. Um, I'm a believer in you know it's ownership. You know, when I went would played intercounty hurling as a younger fella, I wanted that ball because I knew what I was going to do for it. I would actively shout looking for the ball. Last 10 seconds, last 10 minutes, I wanted to be the person who was put in, not not for anything other than I knew I could get it done, by the way. And actually, I didn't want people to know I had got it done because it wasn't about them knowing, it was about me knowing I stepped up to being the person I was at that time and delivering. Others, yeah, as I said, you're looking up and you know you're too far out for take a shot for a score yourself, and you're looking to get somebody inside, and all you can see is the back of heads running away, and they never stop running because you can only run so far before you're over the end line. Well, then they'll run in a different direction, and their head is pointing exactly where they're running because the last thing they want to do is look up because that ball, if they get it, that gives them a problem because they don't want that moment. They don't want to take ownership in that moment. Um, if they're in the 9 ring for me and shooting, they're out there for a reason. One could go, by the way, and this is a thing I'll talk about later too. I don't see mistakes as a problem per se, but for me, a mistake is something that happens once. After that, it's a choice. Um, I'll take a bad shot. It could end up in the 9.9 or something like that. You're going, well, why did that happen? Now, it's not running off the deep end here. What I'm actually doing is going in my process, what brought about that. And I focus on the element I believe that I let slip at the standard so that it executes a certain way. That's um, that's the way I do things. Um, I remember being at a job a long, long time ago now. I was looking for doing an interview and interviewed by the senior manager as such that I was going to answer into. And it was while we were in the interview, I stopped it and I just went, look, I need to be honest here. I don't feel that there's alignment here. I think what you want is this type of a person they're gonna come to you every day and ask you what to do next. And I'm not that guy. I know you give me the job to do, I go and do it. It'll be done better than you've ever expected, but you don't need to hold my hand. I'll check in with you to let you know we're in alignment, the numbers are showing up, and that's not what you want. And what I could see was that person, I told him there was no harm, no foul. The reality was it would have created tension there that was unnecessary. Every day I'd have showed up, that person's worst fears would have been realized. You've got this person who is doing the job. That'll sound funny, by the way, but that's actually reality. There are people who don't want that. They want to build in an environment where they're needed. So that's a thing. So yeah, people sometimes don't want exactly what they say they want. Um, I'd say that people present one version of themselves as well, but if you listen really well with your eyes and your ears, you'll realize that's not who they are. And then you get the choice of deciding whether that you still want to be around that person or not. Um, I think pressure shows you over a period of time, pressure will show you if those relationships, if those people are people that you want to be around. Um, I'd say pressure. When you feel pressure, don't take it as the negative. Take it as an indicator, and ask yourself, what is this pressure showing me? Not how do I explain it away, you know? Because there's a learning opportunity when pressure comes. You can learn about how it's hitting you, why it's hitting you, and you can learn about what to do so it doesn't hit you. Or you can just accept it, or you can try and cover it. Not really, not really a good way to go about things, I feel. Um, I think that pressure reveals default behaviors. That's a big thing for me. Um, Truth is neutral, you know. Um, Many people want to appear that, they want to be the response. I want to be the person that's leading the team. Why? Not particularly to deliver the outcome. It's more I want leadership. I want to be the person at the top. That falls apart after a while because you realize that it's the identity they want rather than alignment, internal alignment being rolled out day after day, week after week in a position. You'll have seen people who are perfectly natural in roles, the word a natural, and then you'll see people who fight in it, and they may be quite good at fighting it, but eventually that type of pressure breaks someone internally. Um, I'd say that your word is one of the clearest indicators of alignment. When you say you're going to do something, either do or you don't. Pressure, when it comes on, it's going to show you exactly how strong your word is. Identity is very important. It doesn't change ever. You are who you are. And you get to you get to work on it and become stronger in it, but really it shows up over time. It shows up in different situations where you become something different, and that's when you'll feel your internal compass is gone or the pressure has come on and it won't go away. And the only way you can improve, I believe, is with honesty. That's the reality of it. Look at it. Look at yourself. My shots, it's a bad shot. I'm not going to improve by doubling down on the fact that I did nothing wrong. Respectfully, I'm the only one holding the rifle, so it can't have been somebody else did something wrong. In project roles, when things have gone wrong, I've owned them. I've also learned from them, because if, as I said, a mistake's a mistake. If you do it once, after that, it's a choice. Also, what I'd say to myself is, why did I not see that? So if something went wrong, why did I not have that down as a risk? Why didn't I identify a mitigating action? That's how I deliver. But I own it. I'd say that pressure reveals your 0 point. The truth is already there, and the question is, are you willing to see it? Um, there's three positions, but there's only one choice. Accept what the pressure revealed, decide whether to keep it or to change it, and stop pretending. So thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you here again. Thank you.